Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, IDC, for hosting this panel, and particularly for hosting a forward-looking panel, because we do have quite a number of important events on the ongoing discrimination, intimidation, and scapegoating. But I think we really need to start thinking about what is the next step, meaning how can Turkey move beyond its current exclusionary regime to an inclusionary system, a governance model, especially now that most polls predict a defeat for Erdogan in the upcoming 2023 elections. Now, I think the first step for both Turkish citizens and Turkey watchers is a recognition that this kind of discrimination, intimidation, scapegoating continued from the Ottoman era to the Republican era and will likely continue after Erdogan. There seems to be no quick fix in the horizon. Yes, for many of Turkey's quote-unquote unmarked citizens, meaning ethnically Turkish, religiously Sunni, and Hanafi citizens, maybe the end of the Erdogan era might have a liberating potential. But for Turkey's marked citizens, especially Christians, Jews, Alevis, and atheists, as well as residents, not just citizens, but also residents, many of the structural problems are there to stay. And unless there is an immediate step taken today to admit and recognize some of these long-running problems, also by members of the opposition. So maybe one of the key take-home messages from today could be, for a member of Turkey's opposition, simply being the fact that they oppose Erdogan does not suffice to make them credible agents of change, credible agents to restore or build inclusion and diversity. And possibly one of the crucial steps to take is to admit and recognize the latent supremacism that has taken hold of Turkey throughout the Republican era. Yes, Turkey has a major divide between self-identified Islamists and self-identified seculars, and they do have different outlooks in life, but ultimately they seem to be almost on the same page when it comes to Turkey's religious minorities, in the sense that they both tend to see them as potential fifth columns, as potential security threats. Yes, for Islamists, this rests on a civilizational, either a pan-Islamist or neo-Ottoman worldview, as Christians and Jews being the other. But for many seculars who would claim to be inclusive, they also have a tendency to securitize the minority issue and see Turkey's Christians particularly as potential collaborators of external forces wanting to, divide or destabilize Turkey. And for those of you who follow the Turkish media closely, this is really ubiquitous, meaning even some of the most quote unquote enlightened members of the Turkish opposition could have these slips of the tongue in which they, in a way, manifest that they have some hidden prejudice that really characterize their outlook on political issues, especially when it comes to minority issues. So as a former lawmaker, let me go quickly into some of the key policy steps that need to be taken, and not in a decade, but immediately, meaning the day after there is a new government in Turkey. So if Turkey's big tent umbrella, coalition succeeds in winning parliamentary and presidential elections, they should really commit to starting reform from day one. And I would argue that at the top of the to-do list would be granting or recognition of the legal status of Turkey's religious communities, especially minority religious communities, because the lack of a legal persona or the refusal to recognize their corporate identity, their corporate entity status, is at the root of many of the problems, because a legal status is the prerequisite for full property rights, for enjoying full property rights. It's an obstacle to self-governance, and coupled with the Turkish government's ongoing obstacles for religious minority foundations to elect board members, this is basically an attempt to decapitate these communities, because the more the state meddles in the election of both faith and lay leaders of Christian communities, the more these communities are at risk of extinction, because there appears to be then a two-pronged strategy. On the one hand, you see these spectacles of inclusion and tolerance, which do not amount to real inclusion, real embrace of diversity. But on the other hand, you're basically driving out Christians, decimating communities. And if this trajectory continues, Turkey will end up with museumified or like showcased Christian, churches and religious sites, but no Christians, but only tourists to visit them. And then a key issue is also to tackle the question of training of faith leaders. The Halki Seminary remains shuttered, and there are all sorts of institutional obstacles to training of faith leaders, to carrying out religious education, and also disseminating one's faith. Turkey's Directorate of Religious Affairs, namely the Diyanet, is actively proselytizing a Sunni Hanafi version of Islam 24/7, but proselytization by Christians themselves is not only criminalized, but also treated completely differently by all levels of Turkey's state apparatus. So the state should begin to be at equal distance to all faiths and to all manifestations of faith. And this is a more proactive agenda as to rebuild an inclusive and enabling and accommodating governance structure. But at the same time, we know that there is an urgent need for restorative justice as well. The question is not just about building an inclusive system, but the question is also about undoing some of the past wrongs. Of course, the first step, which is, I would argue, the easiest step that could be taken the day after, is an official apology and recognition of the past wrongs, then coupled in time with restitution of property, proper compensation, as well as a state commitment to diversity training at all levels, and a commitment to ending Turkey's culture of impunity. And what better way to demonstrate that than by bringing some of these most heinous hate crimes to justice? We know that most hate crimes, violent hate crimes targeting Turkey's Christian as well as Jewish communities, remain unpunished. Court cases drag on for years and years, and often culprits or suspects are treated leniently. And this is, of course, in stark contrast to journalists, academics, philanthropists who dedicate their lives to diversity and inclusion. Here we have to remember the ongoing persecution of Osman Kavala, who is one of Turkey's top philanthropists who have dedicated his life to embracing and promoting diversity in Turkey. So I call him a secular saint, and he is really a crucial force in Turkey to push for some of the changes I have been outlining. And it's really shameful that he has been jailed in a maximum security prison in solitary confinement by the Erdogan regime. So let me end now, because my time has come to an end, by also suggesting that one easy formula for Ankara to take is to commit to implementing all the rulings of the European Court of Human Rights without further delay, and also to commit to the full implementation of the European Convention on Human Rights as an overall formula for bringing these steps into action. And thank you.